Okay, so welcome back to the second part of this this overlay effect tutorial. We've already created this, which isn't much. We haven't actually created the overlay, but we've spoken a lot about the markup that we've used and the styles that we've used so far. So let's go ahead and jump right into actually creating this overlay. Now remember, the text that we created here was a span element, so we need to apply any styles to this span element. So let's go ahead and say image box span. So we're targeting the span within image box. Obviously, if you had two spans, which is unlikely anyway, because you would place any other styling elements within span or within a div within here, however you decide to do this. So yeah, bear in mind that we're only styling a span within this image box. So if you include any other spans, they'll also be styled. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue to do this. Now, because this is currently sat outside of the box, we need to give it a position where we can place it anywhere we want, very specifically within this container. And the easiest way we're going to be able to do that is using the absolute position. So let's go ahead and say position absolute. And this is where we're going to start to run into problems. You'll notice nothing will change when I refresh now. Well, something's changed. It's come away from here, but we haven't actually positioned it anywhere differently. It's still sat in the same position. With position absolute, we give a bottom, top, left, right value, and that will position it in relation to the parent element. But it'll only position it in relation to the parent element if the parent element has a position of relative. So, for example, let's just say, for example, I wanted to position it in the top left-hand corner of this image here, or this container, because remember the container starts just here. So I might say, for example, top 0 and left 0. So you would think that because this span is within this div, and this div is the blue area that you see at the moment, not the yellow/orange area, you would think that it would come and just sit nicely up here. Well, in actual fact, it sits at the top of the body. And the reason for this is we haven't given the image box element a position of relative. So if we say position relative, and then we go ahead and refresh, you can see it now sits within our container, which is obviously housing our 200 by 200 pixel image. And our container is 200 by 200, so it just sits at the edge of the image, which is what we want. We obviously don't want it at the top though, we want it at the bottom. So we could say bottom left, and this would place it down here at the bottom. So we've already achieved the effect that we actually want to achieve. We just need to go ahead and give this element a background color, a bit of padding, a color, and then we'll deal with the transparency, then we'll deal with the IE issues. So, the properties that we need to give it, well, we obviously need to go ahead and give it a background. We'll deal with that in just a moment. In fact, let's do it now. We'll create the transparent background now. Now, the reason I wanted to do this is it demonstrates a really good way of thinking about things. Let's just go ahead and set the background to black, which you may expect. We might then go ahead and apply the opacity property. So for example, opacity 0.75. We can also do 0.75, we don't have to use a 0. This would set the element at 75% opacity. Fine, we can still see through the element now. We can see the background. Let's go ahead and set the color of the foreground color, or the text color, to white, and we'll see how this has affected it. Now it doesn't look like it has affected it too much at the moment. What happens if we set this to 0.25? Now you'll notice that the text color as well, in fact this is a really bad example. Let's go ahead and set this to red. There. Now you notice that the text color as well, or the text, has also changed. The opacity has been lowered as well. The reason for this is that the opacity property will apply the opacity or will change the opacity for the span element and anything that's included within it. So that includes the text that we've also placed inside of here. So we need another way of dealing with this background problem, or this background color. So I'm going to remove opacity, and instead I'm going to set the background to RGB A. Now you may have seen the RGB property, so for example 000 is black in RGB, so we would achieve the same effect here where we've got the black background. We've got the red text for now, but that's just to demonstrate, but you get the idea. Now CSS3 introduces a new property which is RGBA, and A stands for alpha. So we can do this exactly the same. So I could say 0.75 or 0.25, again omitting the 0 if required or if needs be. So you'll now notice that the opacity of the background, or the alpha of the background, has changed. It's more see-through now. However, anything within this has not changed because we're just applying the transparency to the background. We're not applying it to the entire element. So we've achieved the effect we want now. Let's go ahead and change this back to 0.75. Let's change the foreground to white, and let's refresh. And we now have our semi-transparent background, although it's hard to see at the moment. When we apply some padding, you'll get this text in here show through. And yeah, you know, we're starting to achieve the effect that we need. So a lot of explanation for that, but it's important to understand the difference between setting an opacity on an element and using RGBA to single out color values. And obviously this can be applied to anything. It can be applied to the color if required as well. So play around with that if you need to. Okay, so let's go ahead and give it some padding. I'll give it 15 pixel padding, which will obviously bring everything inwards and expand the height of this smaller container as well. And let's go ahead and just change the font. Probably not a good idea to change the font just specifically within this, but since we're doing this as a standalone example, we can go ahead. I'm going to set the font to Georgia and provide the serif fallback. Okay, so we've got that text inside of there now. It's starting to look good, really. We've achieved what we need to do already. I'm just going to do one last thing, which isn't necessary at all, but I'm going to set the text style to italic. So now you can start to see that the background is showing through. We've got this container. It's looking nice. It's essentially looking exactly as I showed you at the start of the tutorial. So we've achieved what we need. However, and there's always a however with Internet Explorer, we've got some problems here. Or older browsers, you know, maybe older versions of Firefox and Chrome, although Firefox and Chrome do update themselves. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's preview this inside of Internet Explorer. So I've got my window open here, and to refresh, and let's go ahead and refresh again. Now I'm using Internet Explorer 9 here. Obviously, depending on the time that you're watching this tutorial, you may have a 10, 11 or 12, I don't know, but it's rendered fine, and that's the point. You know, we've rendered this and it looks okay. However, I'm going to go ahead and open F12 or Developer Tools. F12 is the shortcut key, I'm guessing, I can actually change the browser mode, so I can go back as far as IE7 here. So if I click, for example, IE8, this happens, which is odd. You might think it's odd. And the same with IE7 as well. We also get this disappeared. Now, it hasn't actually disappeared. Don't worry, we've still got the text there. However, the RGBA property here isn't supported in IE7 or 8, and for that matter 6 as well, if you are considering users that far back. Now there's a simple solution to this. We unfortunately can't provide the transparent background unless we, for example, used a transparent GIF image or a PNG image. However, I'm just going to fall back to a solid color, and I'm not going to worry too much about the transparency. So I'm going to say background black, and then after this, if this property RGBA is available, it will apply it. So now we can see that when we open up Chrome, everything looks the same. When we open up IE and we choose IE8, we get just this solid black background. So IE9, we get the transparency. IE8, we just get a solid color. And as I said, you could You could, for example, apply URL, and you could choose a semi-transparent, image here. But I'm just going to leave this as a solid color. Now, Internet Explorer 7, we fixed this. However, we've now got an issue with our width. Okay, so we could fix this by, let's say, coming in here and saying width 100%, which you would assume to work. The only problem with the width 100% is we've added the padding. So we need a way to, let's just refresh, i.e. we need a way to pull this inwards. And I'm just going to simply do this with basic calculation. So we've got a width of 200, we've got padding of 15 pixels on the left and the right, that's a total of 30. So we essentially just take 30 from 200, so we've got 170 pixels. And obviously I'll need to add the width property in there. So now we've got this width of 170, we've accounted for the padding on either side, and this also now renders properly in Internet Explorer 7. So we've provided support for IE 7, 8 and 9, which allows us to have the transparency, and we obviously have support in Chrome, Firefox, Safari, any other browsers that are, keeping up to date with themselves. So this is how to create this nice image overlay opacity effect. Unfortunately, with IE 7 and 8 it's a bit more difficult, but we've looked at how we can provide the user with at least some content, and allow them to still read what we've written. So that's how to create this effect in CSS.